Hi, I'm Nick Sohn, Chief Customer Officer at Brennan, and welcome back to another Executive Insights. Today, I'm talking all things AI with our Head of Digital Solutions, Steve Anderton. Thanks for joining me, Steve.
Thanks, Nick.
Okay, Steve, I know you've been out on the road, I think every state in the last 3 or 4 weeks, talking AI to a whole bunch of our customers. What have you found?
We've been around the country, about 5 states, about 70 customers. Some common stories that are coming out, some common themes from those conversations. The hype around AI is putting it hard on the agenda for a lot of organizations, and a lot of CIOs who are at the table, but also CFOs. So we had a real broad mix of people coming from business and from tech and trying to align. The common theme that came out was generative AI is causing a lot of conversation, a lot of opportunity, but it's been based around productivity and efficiency gains. Very hard to justify. So a lot of the customers were talking to us about they're finding it very difficult to get investment and to prove the value and to prove the business case and prove the use case. So that's been a really interesting insight. But then also what we were seeing is the opportunities that they were seeing the use cases, they were seeing the opportunities, but then to take them forward into a production to actually then drive value, drive outcome has been a real challenge for them.
Yeah, so when you talk about getting some of these ideas together, we are seeing some customers think about micro innovation or small innovation and trying to get an actual benefit in their business. Can you talk to me about that?
Yeah, there were some really good examples, but also something we're talking a lot to our customers about is if you try and eat the elephant all at once, it's going to be a very hard business case to stand up. So what we were seeing and what we're talking to our customers about is the micro innovation concept about how do you take these use cases, run them through a matrix of aligning them to business outcomes and business value, be it saving money, making money, reducing risk, or improving CX. Have a matrix that you can quickly qualify these use cases and then put them through a rapid ideation, prioritization to find the use cases that are really going to drive value to the business, putting some metrics around those so you can prove those metrics back to the business, and then standing something up really quickly, really fast to put the actual solution in the hands of the business to prove that value before you then go and put the business case forward. So it's really about how do you then prove those use cases without over-investing. And that was a very common theme. And there's some customers doing some awesome things, but I think the majority that was a opportunity that they saw as a real tangible way of driving innovation, leveraging AI.
When we think about AI, what we don't often think about is the data sources that underpin the artificial intelligence. And I think what we have been seeing in our customer base is a lack of readiness around data governance and data capture of where the data is stored. And I think there's a whole bunch of work that needs to be done across a lot of customers out there in fixing their data source and making sure that there's integrity and really endorsed data sets.
Yep.
So is that the sort of thing you've been seeing as you get around the country?
Yeah, as you say, innovation became the top level conversation, but it quickly then took its way to, are we ready? And it came to the data. The gold, so to speak, sits within their data and customers' data. And that's a lot of the work that was needed to be done, was to put the architecture, the platform in place, put the governance and the security to make sure that these endorsed data sets, as you said, is exactly right. Is how do you present these data sets almost like a product, data as a product back to the stakeholders, back to the business users to then be able to innovate on top of. It's a journey a lot of our customers were going on. And I would say probably about 80 to 90% in the room, their focus was get the platform to a state where you can innovate. Don't innovate on an unstable platform. And the data seemed to be the absolute critical point where most of the customers were focused on.
Yeah, and I think it's an important topic, and it kind of melds in with security, cybersecurity. Right. So how important is cybersecurity when you're thinking about your data and AI strategy?
You can't think, essentially you can't think of them separately. It's a holistic proposition. Call it cybersecurity, data governance, data integrity. You really have to focus on that. So yeah, a lot of our customers, and we did the event. The events around the country with Adapt, and they had polled a lot of CIOs, CTOs, CFOs as well in terms of understanding where AI was being driven from, and security, data governance, data, the management, the data architecture, and the platform, and the readiness of those platforms was absolutely critical. But they all go hand in hand. They can't be looked at as siloed initiatives.
Yeah, and it's there's another topic that I want to talk about, which is return on investment, ROI. It's really important around every IT project has an ROI attached to it normally. What are you seeing when it comes to AI and ROI?
So the ROI, what we were hearing and what we're seeing also in the conversations with our customers is that the time to value is probably the more critical factor. Proving value is obviously critical for any business case, but retrospectively going back and actually benchmarking that against what the original intent was to what you've actually achieved, but having metrics you can measure throughout the whole course of that. But it's also the speed. There is, we were seeing, and some of the data that Adapt shared with us was that, within 6 months, organizations are looking for a return. So the speed to value is also as critical as that as actual the ROI metric that they're looking to achieve. But it's really, it was interesting talking to our customers around how they're measuring that value, and then how they're then using that to then go and get the funding they need from the executive. And we heard from a bunch of CFOs that came into the conversations that they're struggling to see the return on investment of some of these initiatives. So that's why these micro-innovation style culture is really starting to accelerate that type of thinking, but also that time to value and that time to decision making is absolutely critical.
Yeah, look, I think ROI never going to go away, always important. I did hear a customer say that AI doesn't need to be perfect and that it's just good enough. It can be good enough for AI. Did you have a view on that?
Yeah, that was an interesting one. And it's that fine line between, machine learning's been around forever. Automation, we've been automating things for a long, long time. So it's also about how we're classifying AI. Are we using it as an umbrella term for every single initiative now because it's top of mind for a lot of people? But I think it depends what type of AI we're talking about, because you can't leave generative AI and trust fully exactly what you're getting from it, because ultimately it's using data to generate the responses. So you've got to be careful in terms of the ethical side, the trust factor, but also the brand and reputational impact of AI, and also the social impact as well. That came up a lot in the conversation. I'm not sure where I stood quite firmly on that ground in terms of it. I like things to go into production that are battle tested and proven and ready to go. But yeah, that was an interesting concept I hadn't necessarily heard bubble up before.
Yeah, and it is an interesting topic you raise around the ethical and potentially regulatory, guardrails that we don't quite have today, but are probably on the horizon somewhere.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about both of those sides of the coin?
I think they all have to be taken into consideration when you're looking at AI from a strategic perspective. That kind of ethical, it depends also the different industries. We had a lot of different industries come through. It was really, really interesting, from government, for not-for-profit, healthcare, financial services, and each one have their own regulatory obligations that they need to adhere to. Some had gone to the full extent of just locking it down and saying, until we know more, until we understand the regulatory impact of what we're doing and we have that guidance, we're just going to put pause on that and we're going to wait for the market to settle. But that seemed to be also not a concept, but a real key deciding factor in the decision making around that strategic intent for AI in their organization. There was a lot, the conversation between a strategic approach to AI and the micro innovation, kind of a bit of a dichotomy going on there. So from our perspective, it was really interesting to see how some organizations were tackling it from a strategic, putting in the planning and really building out an AI strategy over the next 2 to 3 years. I was challenging some of that thinking, saying it's really difficult to do based on the shifts we're seeing in the market and what horse you're backing, I suppose, in terms of the technology stack that you're implementing. But really, a lot of that work is around the governance, the ethical nature, and the regulatory impact.
Yeah, okay, that's interesting. I do have a really important question, and it's one that we don't talk about often enough, I don't think, when the topic of AI comes up. It's the users, the end users. How do we train those end users? How do we get them engaged in the use of the technology so that we can get the best out of it?
Yeah, and I think it was an interesting part of the conversations that we had, and something that is definitely feels like a bit of an afterthought. And I think part of the reason is that these tools have gone out into the public domain really fast. They're very accessible. So people have access to these tools. What's happened is you're putting into a corporate environment, change management is a bit of an afterthought. So a lot of the work that was being done by some of these organizations we were speaking to was retrospectively going back and training them on the value of these tools to their specific role, to the outcomes they want to achieve. But if I look in our own organization as well, it's a cautious approach to the value you get from these tools and how you're using it in your everyday role to drive the value and the outcome that you need. So I think that's a big part that was, I think, a recognized gap, but incredibly important as part of that approach to AI and adoption, which it should be for any kind of new technology platform you're doing. So I don't know why we're treating AI any differently to a piece of software that we've built and deployed.
I think that's spot on. I think that AI has seemed to override some of our typical thinking around technology projects, and that always involves the users and the people that are going to be adopting the technology.
Yep. Oh, look, there's so much opportunity out there. And when you look at efficiency from from your day-to-day type of role that you would perform and, the content you generate, but also from developers who are building software, the opportunity to do that, but your practices should remain the same in terms of your diligence about the output. And a lot of the conversation would be around, that was at the table was, it generates all of this content, but you still have to make sure the content's correct. You still have to make sure that your brand message, if you're putting outbound content, or the software you're building is fit for purpose, because if you're just leaving it up to a tool to build for you, you've got to be very clear on the gates you're putting in place to make sure that your guardrails across your business are efficient, like they should be for any kind of content or product that you're building.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Steve. Now, I've got a final question for you. Just zooming out a little bit, your final thoughts on AI and how businesses can get the most out of it.
Look, I think one thing that was recognised, just an opinion, but also what we heard from the wide variety of customers in the industries we spoke to, the value is there, the opportunity is there. There are no end of use cases, but the alignment to the business strategy, the overall organisational strategy, if you work backwards from there to put your technology strategy in place that is aligning to that and proven tangible return on investment to make sure you're making the right investments for the right outcome. And if it's aligned to your business strategy, not doing stuff in isolation, the micro innovation has to be attached to the business outcome, the value you want to derive from it, but it has to start with your business strategy, has to align to your technical strategy. When they meet in the middle, AI is an enabler of that in one way, shape or form. But if you're not aligned to the business outcome and the business value, that's been the same from every IT project that I've ever worked on in my 25 years, is if you're not focused on the outcome, if you're not attaching to business value, if you're not proving based on the metrics that can prove that outcome and value, then why are you doing it? You're never going to get investment if you can't prove the outcome.
Yep. So the more things change, the more they stay the same.
Absolutely.
I'm sure some of our CFOs would like to hear what you're saying. Definitely, yep. ROI, very important.
Incredibly important. Yep.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us, Steve.
Pleasure. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks for joining us. That's another Executive Insights. See you next time.